Today on the show, we're going to go through Republican weaknesses leading into 2026. What do Republicans need to do to reverse the results of this week politically? We will also be getting to Sydney Sweeney and that amazing interview that she recently did. And we will also be getting to the government shutdown. Will it continue? When will it end? First, Friendly Fire returns Wednesday night, November 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. What exactly is Friendly Fire? Well, we are glad you asked. It's the show where Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and I get together to disagree for the entire internet to watch and comment on in real time. This time, we're world premiering the official trailer for the Pendragon cycle, The Rise of the Merlin. You've seen the teaser. Now get ready for the trailer that's going to blow you away. It's all happening on Friendly Fire Wednesday, November 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. Well, folks, there are some lessons that must be learned by Republicans from the elections of this week. The reality is, as I talked about a couple of days ago, the elections this week weren't just obviously in Virginia or in New Jersey or in New York City. Actually, Republicans did pretty poorly across the board. There's a point being made by Matt Continetti, now of the Wall Street Journal. He says the off-year Democratic wave flooded Republican safe harbors. Democrats flipped at least 13 seats in Virginia's House of Delegates. They plan to use their governing trifecta, control of the governor's mansion and both legislative chambers, to redraw the state's congressional map in their own favor. New Jersey Democrats now enjoy their largest assembly majority in 52 years. Georgia Democrats won 2 seats on the Public Service Commission. That's the state's utility board. No Democrat has won even a single race there since 2007. So that is 18 years ago. One of the reasons for that is because the electricity prices have been spiking and have continued to kind of softly go up during President Trump's term. This obviously should be a warning sign for Republicans. And when you look at the 2026 election, the importance of Republicans retaining the House. The Senate, it looks like Republicans are in fairly decent shape to retain. In order for Democrats to actually take the Senate in the next election cycle, they would have to flip a rather unlikely seat like, say, Iowa. But in Congress, where Republicans basically have zero margin at this point, Democrats do not need to flip very many seats in order to take the House. So there are approximately, according to Cook Political Report, 16 toss-up seats. Okay, those toss-up seats, right now, 10 of those are held by Republicans. So that's not great for Republicans. When you look at another 8 that lean Republican and 10 that lean Democrat, you're talking about kind of a total possible variance of 34 seats. Now, Republicans would have to do really, really poorly to lose all of those. But again, they don't have to lose many of those to lose control of the House. If they lose control of the House, all you're going to get all day long are hearings and investigations and impeachments. And we know that all of this is the case. And we also know that it wouldn't solely be due to anything that President Trump is doing. Midterm elections almost always go the direction of the party that is out of power. Since World War II, according to Newsweek, the president's party has lost an average of 26 House seats and 3 to 4 Senate seats in midterms. When the president's approval rating is below 50%, the losses tend to be more severe. Presidents with a sub 50% job approval have seen their parties lose an average of 37 House seats, as opposed to when the president is popular, where they lose about 14 seats on average. So again, Republican enthusiasm seems to not be nearly as high as it is when President Trump is on the ballot, obviously. And a sinking economy, or at least an economy that doesn't feel as though it is soaring, is having a significant downstream impact. There are audiences that President Trump brought in who are beginning to move against President Trump. One of those is Latino audiences, Latino voters, which went very heavily toward President Trump in the last election cycle, seem to be bleeding away. In New Jersey and in Virginia, Latinos backed the Democrats by huge margins. According to the Washington Post, exit polls showed Democrats regaining strength with Latinos. That's not because Democrats are doing an extraordinary job. It's because presumably there has been so much focus on the immigration crackdowns. It's one thing to shut the border. It's another thing if there's stuff all over your TV about Abuela being taken out and then deported. Now, again, I think that all of that media coverage has been pretty terrible, overblown, inaccurate. But just speaking politically, obviously, this is not redounding to the benefit of Republicans among Latinos, at the very least. But the real issue here is the economy. And we all know that the real issue here is the economy. Every exit poll from this week, every single one, said the economy was the number one issue. And the reality is that our economy is on some shaky footing. Not only because of the continued government shutdown, which will end, but because of a generalized feeling that the economic growth that we are currently seeing is not a broad-based economic growth. That when we are looking at the stock market, for example, the vast majority of stock market gains, nearly all of them, in fact, have accrued to the top 7 companies in the market, all of which seem to be focused on tech and AI. Industries where jobs are being created, but not industries where the vast majority of people are holding jobs. They're not really service industries, which is where the vast bulk of American jobs are. The tech industry is really important, but if it's the entirety of your economic growth, you got a bit of a problem. And the reason that that is happening is because investors don't know where to put their money. That is due to tariffs. It is due to bizarre regulations. It is due to a generalized feeling of too much government involvement in private industry. It turns out the more the government is involved in the economy, the more investors are likely to try and discern where the government hand is likely to come down next and then place their money there. And that is a major problem. This is something that Republicans very much should be considering as they head into the next year. So, for example, there haven't been any Bureau of Labor Statistics data put out about job loss over the course of the last couple of months, but there are some private services that actually do put out numbers. ADP, a payroll processing firm, according to the New York Times, reported that employment at private companies fell in September but rebounded modestly in October. An alternative measure from Revelio Labs, a labor market data firm, showed the opposite. Data from LinkedIn, Bank of America, and other sources paint a similarly mixed picture. The bottom line is that the trend line seems to be going down when it comes to private sector employment. It hasn't changed dramatically since the summer. Employers are apparently not adding many jobs, but they've avoided resorting to widespread layoffs. So again, everybody's sort of holding steady, which is why it does feel as though the economy is on the edge. We've already seen that some major companies are planning mass layoffs. That'd be Amazon, UPS, IBM. Altogether, according to the New York Times, companies announced more than 150,000 job cuts in October, nearly triple the number in the same month a year earlier. Now, again, maybe that's wrong. Maybe the data come in and it turns out that things are going fine. But what the polls are showing is that people are deeply worried about the state of the economy. And earlier this week, and really since the beginning of this week, there's been a relatively significant decline in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. There's a rather large sell-off on Tuesday. One of the things that's been happening in the market is because nobody knows where to put their money. They don't know how to invest in industries. Typically, if you're going to buy a stock, instead of thinking of stocks as though you're at the casino, you're supposed to buy a piece of a company that you like because you think it's a good company and it is likely to succeed into the future. That is not the way a lot of people are treating the stock market right now. They're treating the stock market the way they're treating crypto. If you're going to buy crypto, you should buy crypto as a hedge against inflation, for example, which is why I myself own some Bitcoin and some Ethereum, but nothing else. If you're treating crypto as a get-rich-quick scheme, if you're treating the stock market as a way of making a quick buck, that is not a solid way to treat your stock trading, your stock portfolio. Just a general piece of financial advice. But that is how people are treating things right now because people are looking around, things are more expensive. All of the inflationary money blown in during the last days of the Trump administration and then the entirety of the Biden administration is still in people's pockets. They don't know what to do with it. Now the Federal Reserve is lowering those interest rates again in an attempt to create more liquidity, which, again, I've always found this strange. We do not have a dearth of liquidity in the United States right now. We don't. We have a dearth of opportunities for where to put the liquidity because nobody knows what to do next. It feels like the market is doing fine, but is also kind of paralyzed. And that's the problem. As James McIntosh of the Wall Street Journal points out, the more speculative an asset, the harder it fell on Tuesday. Big tech and artificial intelligence, penny shares, retail investor favorites, and crypto all dropped together. Gold fell too, failing in its role as a haven asset after attracting lots of new buyers with a big rise earlier this year. It's notable that for many of the most speculative assets, the sell-off started last month. But until Tuesday, it hadn't drawn in the country's biggest companies. All right, coming up, we'll get into the media deciding that it's very, very bad for Elon Musk to be compensated by his own shareholders. First, there's a reason I'm proud to say Pure Talk is my wireless company, because they don't just talk the talk, they actually walk the walk, especially when it comes to supporting our veterans. This month, Pure Talk is choosing to support Canines for Warriors, an incredible organization that rescues and trains dogs and then pairs them with veterans struggling with PTSD. These are men and women who served with honor, but when they come home, that brotherhood, that support network they had in the military, too often it disappears. Canines for Warriors steps up to fill that gap, giving these heroes purpose, companionship, and healing. That's exactly why Pure Talk, a veteran-led company, supports them. Choose a wireless company that shares your values. With talk, text, plenty of 5G data for just $25 a month, you could be saving a lot of money. Obviously, I'm on the road a lot these days. That means I'm using my phone to call my kids. I care about my calls, the quality of them, the cost of them. That's why I'm proud to use Pure Talk. PureTalk.com/Shapiro to make that switch today. Again, head on over to PureTalk.com/Shapiro. Switch to America's wireless company, Pure Talk. That's PureTalk.com/Shapiro for the best coverage at the best price and a company that actually likes you. Check them out, PureTalk.com/Shapiro. Also, if you're ever worried about the safety of your home, you need to hear about Simply Safe and their early access Black Friday sale. Traditional security systems only respond after somebody has already broken into your home. Simply Safe works differently. With Active Guard outdoor protection, AI-powered cameras can detect threats while intruders are still outside and immediately alert real security agents who spring into action. Here's what makes this a true game changer. Those agents don't just watch, they actively confront the intruder in real time, speaking directly to them through the camera to let them know they're being watched, that police are on the way, and, if necessary, triggering a loud siren and spotlight. While other systems have cameras that let you talk to intruders yourself, they depend on you seeing the alert in the first place. Simply Safe's monitoring agents have your back 24/7, confronting threats even when you're not available, which means they can actually stop crimes before they happen. We have Simply Safe for the studio. That means, our expensive cameras and this beautiful set. All that stuff is safe because of Simply Safe. Plus, there are no long-term contracts or hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. No wonder they've been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News and World Report for 5 years running. Don't miss out on Simply Safe's biggest sale of the year, 60% off. Right now, our listeners can save 60% off on a Simply Safe home security system at simplysafe.com/Shapiro. That's simplysafe.com/Shapiro. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So there are drops, for example, from Palantir, which I think is a good stock, but it plummeted 8% despite better than expected quarterly results. The Magnificent Seven big tech stocks fell 2.2%, compared with a drop of less than 1% for the rest of the S&P 500. Tesla fell the most, and it is because of the stock market valuations, which are, again, wildly out of whack with the earnings of these companies. That is why you end up with a $1 trillion package for Elon Musk. That is why. So one of the yardsticks that I look at when I'm determining whether I think stocks are overvalued is the PE ratio. That is the price to earnings ratio in a stock. And typically, when you're looking at price to earnings ratio, you want to look for low price to earnings ratio. It means that a stock might be undervalued. If you have really, really high, that means you expect the stock to just explode. Well, right now, the current PE ratios at the top of the market are pretty much insane, like totally crazy. According to our friends over at Comet, my sponsors at Comet, a new web browser by Perplexity, the current PE ratios for the Magnificent Seven as of November 2025 include Apple at 36. Okay, again, Benjamin Graham suggested 16 to 18. 36, Microsoft at 34, NVIDIA at 53, Amazon at 34, Alphabet at 30. According to Comet, those figures reflect each company's trailing 12-month PE ratio as of the first week of November 2025. Tesla has the highest valuation by far, which is presumably why stockholders are desperate to keep Elon Musk there. So, for example, right at the moment, the price to earnings ratio on Tesla is 307. That is a big bet that a lot of people are making on Tesla. And again, I love Tesla. I think it's a great company. I own a Tesla. I think Elon is a genius. Also, a PE ratio of 307 is unthinkable. Benjamin Graham, who is sort of the financial forebear of Warren Buffett and his ideological mentor when it came to markets, he said that a typical PE ratio that was in safe zone was 16 to 18. 307. 307 is what we are talking about for Tesla, which feels, a little wild to me, frankly. NVIDIA, their PE ratio right now is 54. Okay, that's very high. Now, NVIDIA, of course, has huge earnings because companies are spending an enormous amount of money on their chips. But if that peters out, do people really think that the stock is going to end up earning out 53 times the earnings? I mean, serious question. If you take a look at Alphabet, the PE ratio on Alphabet right now is significantly better. Okay, that is 28, which is closer to reality. And fundamentals trading to me is always a safer bet than this sort of speculative trading. But the problem is that everybody doesn't know where to put their money. They want to make a quick buck. They're looking at the market. They're feeling like, okay, instead of investing in stocks that pay dividends, for example, stocks that have a nice steady cash flow, stocks that are a solid business with growth potential that is steady but isn't exponential. Instead, they're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to jump on the bandwagon of one of the Mag 7. And this is precisely why Tesla had no choice but to give a gigantic pay package to Elon Musk. So people are pointing out, they're saying, oh my gosh, in this time of economic hardship for so many people, why is Elon Musk getting $1 trillion pay package? Well, the answer, of course, is that it isn't cash. He's not being given $1 trillion in cash. He's being given stock and incentives. And the reason for that is because if Musk were to break with Tesla, I think it's a fair assumption the stock would collapse, and everybody at the board knows it. According to the New York Times, Tesla shareholders on Thursday approved a plan that could make Elon Musk the world's first trillionaire. Now, again, the New York Times is contrasting this with the tax the rich candidacy of Zoran Mamdani. Okay, the market rationale for why Elon Musk is getting that pay package is because the shareholders, meaning the people who actually own the company, believe he is worth that. They believe that without Elon Musk's brain driving the next creative steps for Tesla, the stock is going to collapse into oblivion. Right? If you were to take the Tesla stock right now and you were to bring its price down to a 20 PE ratio, price to earnings ratio, then you'd have to divide the stock price by a factor of 15. And so what they're figuring is you're buying the future with Tesla. That's what the stock is. If you lose the future because you lose Musk and it just turns into a car company with some AI capacity, then you got a major, major problem. That has nothing to do with, quote unquote, taxing the rich. Taxing Elon Musk is not going to fix the real issues with the market. The real issue with the market right now is that the middle bulk of the market is not being invested in. And one of the reasons that it's not being invested in is, sure, there are hungry speculators with too much cash in their pocket thanks to the free reign of free money for a very long time. But also, there's tremendous uncertainty if you're in a service industry or a manufacturing industry about the tariffs. That does make a gigantic difference. There's no question that people are confused and discombobulated by the day-to-day action of the administration. As I've been saying, for literally the entirety of the Trump administration, if the administration pursued lower taxes, lower regulation, free trade agreements with everybody around China, the economy would be in better shape. Because the conditions that you need to succeed as a mid-level to smaller company are conditions that allow for the fullest freedom of action in the labor markets, in the export markets, in the input markets. That's what you actually need. And so to this sort of economic policy where we keep sticking fingers in the pie is not going to make anyone quiescent, and it's not going to produce more jobs. But that has nothing to do with Elon. And the attempt to kind of pin this on Elon and Tesla seems to me merely some class envy directed at Elon. Now, again, from a sort of generalized perspective, would I buy Tesla stock at its current price? I would not on a personal level, because that PE ratio is out of whack to me, and I like to trade based on fundamentals. But the idea that somehow Elon Musk getting a big pay package is a justification of Zoran Mamdani's socialism is totally crazy. These two things are utterly unrelated. Zoran Mamdani's answer would be take away all the money of Elon Musk, prevent those kinds of deals, watch the stock of Tesla crater, and all the stockholders go down. Presumably that would somehow be better in some way. Remember, that pay package is dependent on people voluntarily engaging in transactions with Tesla and buying their stock, allowing for the issuance of new stock. That's where that money is coming from. The New York Times tries to admit this, on paragraph 8, because that's what they do. They're going to fib by omission, and then later they buy it back. These are vastly different arenas, to be sure, but that split-screen reality speaks to a larger divide in American business and politics. On one side are billionaires like Mr. Musk, and their many supporters, including President Trump, who see the financial success of a small group of executives as something to be celebrated and emulated. On the other are progressives like Mr. Mamdani, a democratic socialist, who are calling for something more akin to the social welfare systems of Western Europe. I love how the New York Times keeps trying to pretend that he's just a Norwegian, Mamdani. He literally said he hates capitalism. The DSA wants him to full-on nationalize housing in New York. His proposals involving, for example, gigantic rent freezes or government-run grocery stores, that is not just social welfare system in Western Europe. But this is going to be the line. The line for Democrats going forward is going to be, if the economy collapses, this is what I've been saying for literally months. I'm not saying anything new here. If the economy goes down, it's an existential danger to the Republican Party, meaning to the country. Because the next step by a lot of people is going to be swiveling over and saying, we need more government. We need more centralized power. Now, the thing I'm saying is that it's the centralization of economic power in the White House, yes, even under President Trump, that has been preventing more growth for the middle class, more wage growth, more business innovation. And if the president would take his hands off the football, that would actually be a better thing than the sort of tariff in and out that we've been playing for a while here. That the attempts to force the Federal Reserve, for example, to lower the interest rates, to inject more liquidity into the system. I've been against that pretty consistently because, to me, the proper interest rate in a functioning economy should be zero. My money should be worth precisely what it was worth yesterday. You shouldn't just be able to degrade my savings by 2% every single year at the whim of a centralized bureaucrat. But I'll tell you what's not going to be a political winner. So the president yesterday denied that prices are going up. Now, listen, to be fair to President Trump, if you take a look at how they rose during Joe Biden's term in office, it of course was way higher. But there comes a point in a presidency, every presidency, where you can no longer say it's better than the last guy. You have to deal with the fact that inflation is still too high at nearly 3%, that people still feel like they're paying too much for groceries. And not only that, they feel very uneasy about their jobs because one of the amazing things, of course, about the gigantic investments being made at the upper end of the market in AI is that I think a lot of people, quite correctly, are worried about the job dislocations that will almost certainly occur as a result of AI growth. So you're going to have this weird situation in which the stock market continues to rise as productivity continues to rise, but jobs are going to decrease because in the initial term, before new jobs are found for everybody in new industries and creative endeavors, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. Well, here's the president denying that the prices are going up. Yeah, again, I don't think that, I don't blame him, but I don't think it's a winning political pitch.
So I don't want to hear about the affordability because right now we're much less. If you look at energy, we're getting close to $2 a gallon gasoline. With Biden, it was $4.50, $5. Another thing, inflation. We had the worst inflation in the history of our country. Now we have virtually no inflation at all. It's down at a very low number and a very normal number. So the affordability is much better with the Republicans. The only problem is the Republicans don't talk about it. And Republicans should start talking about it and use their heads because we have great numbers.
Well, again, I agree with much of what he is saying, but it's not going to be a sort of winning electoral proposal. Democrats are just going to campaign on the fact that people don't feel great about the economy. Now, ironically, one of the things that could help the Trump presidency is if the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs. If the Supreme Court strikes down the tariffs, the economy is going to rip because a lot of investors who've been sitting on the sidelines are going to suddenly feel secure that their inputs are not going to be increased, jacked up randomly by 30, 40, 50%, depending on where they're getting their products from. And they're not going to fear as much that export markets are going to disappear. So it actually could be a blessing in disguise if the Supreme Court smacks down the tariffs. Coming up, are President Trump's tariffs actually inhibiting the growth of the economy? And if so, could there be sort of a blessing in disguise if the Supreme Court strikes them down? First, what if you could consistently find whatever it is you're looking for right now? We're talking everything from that important email to the perfect recipe for dinner to your keys when you're already running late. Imagine how much time you'd save. Well, you might not ever instantly find these things. If you're hiring, you can instantly find qualified candidates time and again with ZipRecruiter. And today you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Finding the right talent doesn't have to feel like searching for a needle in a haystack. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology cuts through the noise and connects you with top candidates fast. No endless scrolling, no guesswork, just results. Their advanced resume database gives you instant access to contact information for qualified professionals, so you can reach out to the people you actually want to hire without jumping through hoops. It's the kind of efficiency that changes how you think about recruiting. And it's working. ZipRecruiter has earned its spot as the #1 rated hiring site on G2, trusted by businesses that need to build great teams without wasting time on platforms that overcomplicate the process. Want to know right away how many qualified candidates are in your area? Look no further than ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within day one. Right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/dailywire. ZipRecruiter is the smartest way to hire. Also, sleep is your secret weapon during cold and flu season. It's literally when your immune system does its best work. Here's the thing. You can't get that deep restorative sleep if you're tossing and turning on the wrong mattress. When you're fighting off germs or trying not to catch them in the first place, having a mattress that actually supports your body and keeps you comfortable all night isn't just nice to have, it's essential. Nobody wants to be tired and run down during the holiday season. Helix knows how to make sure you're waking up your best self. Finding the right mattress doesn't have to be guesswork. Helix makes it simple with their sleep quiz. It asks about your preferences and sleep style and then matches you with the mattress that's actually right for you. They're not just making promises. Helix is the most awarded mattress brand out there with glowing reviews from Forbes, Wired, and other trusted experts. The best part? They deliver straight to your door with free shipping, so no hauling anything yourself. Plus, but they're happy with Helix Guarantee. You get 120 nights to try it out and a limited lifetime warranty. So if it's not working for you, returns and exchanges are totally seamless. It's basically a risk-free way to finally get the sleep you deserve, especially when you need it most. I've had my Helix Sleep mattress for years. I got home very, very late last night, plopped on that mattress, and man, it was just fantastic. Go to helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Ben for 27% off site-wide. Make sure you enter our show name into the post-purchase survey so they know we sent you. helixsleep.com/Ben. As the Wall Street Journal points out, the Trump administration has misused executive authority here. They have. The power of the purse belongs to Congress. Tariffs are, in fact, taxes on Americans. But again, beyond the legal, it would be better for the country if we had lower tariffs. Now, I understand that this is very near and dear to the president's heart. I get it. And I understand his feeling that we have been screwed in past trade negotiations. I don't even disagree with that. But the answer to that is to negotiate better deals with countries, not to put blanket tariffs on allies that we need. Is this going to be the precursor of change? I don't know. Here's the head of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett. He says, our agenda will not be slowed.
But the thing I want everybody to listen to right now from this White House is that they are not going to slow down our agenda. They are not going to upend our agenda. That we're working every day so that when the government gets open, we can, basically fire hose new policies at the Senate and get everything that we can possibly think of accomplished this year if they open the government. So President Trump, they're trying to slow down President Trump's agenda, but they're not going to be able to do it. They need to give up that thought and put the American people first.
Okay, so again, if what we're talking about here are more tariffs or more interventions, I understand that President Trump likes the headline of some firm telling him they're going to invest $10 billion in the United States and build a factory. I've yet to see that money actually delivered and actually build the factory. Joe Biden used to say the same kind of stuff, of course. He used to say, we're going to take tax dollars and we're going to CHIPS Act, and by tomorrow morning, you're going to see 1 bajillion million jobs and chip manufacturing. Yeah. And you know what? That never materialized. So you might get a bit of a sugar high from an announcement, a sort of corporatist announcement where the United States government has taken a stake in X company. But the conditions that lead to long-term economic prosperity, particularly in times of change, are conditions that allow for innovation, investment, adjustment on the fly. Let the free market work. Let it work. That is my recommendation. Now, meanwhile, the government shutdown continues apace. The Senate is apparently exploring some sort of plan in order to end the government shutdown. The Wall Street Journal reports that Senate Majority Leader Thune told Senate Republicans on Thursday they should expect to vote on a new proposal today aiming to end the government shutdown, according to people familiar with the plan. Democrats say that they are not sold on the emerging package. Some say they would need their core demand of extending Obamacare subsidies to be part of any legislation. The plan to vote on a revised proposal comes as the impact of the shutdown continues to grow. Obviously, government workers, many of them are not being paid. Low-income families are seeing cuts in SNAP. Airlines are cutting flights because of the FAA. The new proposal would apparently combine a short-term spending measure with a package of 3 full-year funding bills covering the legislative branch, agriculture, and military construction and veterans affairs. It was unclear whether the interim measure would keep the government open through mid-December or January. Democrats, of course, have been saying they only want more Obamacare subsidies. They want to reverse the one big beautiful bill on Obamacare. Republicans are acknowledging something else. Senator Thune said the Democrats are walking back or slow walking this, that they're the ones who are really holding this back. Apparently, one of the elements that's under consideration by the Senate, and again, this is Republicans making concessions right now. The Republicans said, clean CR. Democrats said no, 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 and started screaming like babies. And we've now been in a government shutdown for well over a month. Well, Republicans now have a choice, which is, I think, a politically smart one. They're going to make some targeted concessions to Democrats, and then Democrats can either take it or leave it, because then it's Republicans who are showing movement, not Democrats. One element under discussion includes a proposal to stop or even roll back some of the firings the White House initiated at the start of the shutdown. It'll be interesting to see whether Democrats cave at all on all of this. Senate Democrats are divided, apparently. According to the Washington Post, the deal that Thune is proposing could appeal to about a dozen Senate Democrats, or at least it was poised to do so. And then Democrats did really well in New Jersey, Virginia, and New York City. And now Democrats are saying, this shutdown stuff is great for us. Maybe we should just continue it. Most of the party is currently expected to reject the proposal, leaving it short of the 60 votes it would need. So, by the way, for those who are saying what Democrats are doing here is not political, it is eminently political, and they're admitting it. Senator Chris Murphy, who's one of the far left senators, he says, quote, Tuesday was a watershed moment. The country, first and foremost, was making a referendum on Donald Trump's corruption and his mishandling of the economy. But they were also making a statement about this fight. Well, the statement they're making is that they want the shutdown to end. And they think that as a punishment to President Trump, Trump will make concessions and then Democrats will end the shutdown. If what Democrats take away from that is we must continue the shutdown under all circumstances, I'm not sure how that's going to play. Because it will, in fact, change the game if Republicans make concessions and Democrats refuse to move 1 iota, 1 inch. And now, the Republicans have been trying to minimize the cost of this thing. They really have. So, for example, when Barack Obama was president and there was a government shutdown over Obamacare, he shut down things like open-air World War II memorials in an attempt to make people feel the pain. He shut down national parks to make people feel the pain. The Republicans are not doing that. Republicans have been trying to minimize the damage while being in compliance with the law. Now, bizarrely, yesterday, a judge ordered the Trump administration to continue to pay SNAP benefits. The problem is that's actually illegal. Okay, the case that was made by the Trump administration would be perfectly happy continuing to pay out SNAP benefits because, again, the idea here is that Republicans don't want to leverage people. Republicans are not interested in using food stamps as a way of harming Americans, thus to get the other side to cave. They understand they're the party in power, but they actually are not supposed to just empty emergency funds from SNAP because the government refuses to go into session and pass a CR. Well, a federal judge in Rhode Island ordered the Trump administration to release full funding for November food stamps by Friday. That oral order came as many, many Americans, 42 million Americans, have lost access to some benefits under SNAP. The U.S. District Court Judge John McConnell, who is, of course, an Obama appointee, no surprise, said, quote, last week, SNAP benefits lapsed for the first time in our nation's history. This is a problem that could have or should have been avoided. The government knew there would be a long delay in paying SNAP benefits and failed to consider the harms individuals who rely on those benefits would suffer. Well, I mean, yes, it's true that it should have been avoided with a clean CR. I'm not sure how that means that you get to unilaterally change the law. Now, again, this bizarre notion that a single judge can force the opening of the law and the misuse of the law this way is strange. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, slapped back at the ruling.
It's an absurd ruling because you have a federal judge effectively telling us what we have to do in the midst of a Democrat government shutdown, which what we'd like to do is for the Democrats to open up the government. Of course, then we can fund SNAP, and we can also do a lot of other good things for the American people. But in the midst of a shutdown, we can't have a federal court telling the president how he has to triage the situation. We're trying to keep as much turned on. We're trying to keep as much going as possible. The president and the entire administration are working on that, but we're not going to do it under the orders of a federal judge. We're going to do it according to what we think we have to do to comply with the law, of course, but also to actually make the government work for people in the midst of the Democrat government shutdown. If they would like to end this, we would welcome working with them to end this government shutdown, and then we wouldn't have to triage what we're going to fund and what we're not going to fund.
Okay, now, again, I think that he is absolutely correct in his assessment of the situation. But, it's a good thing that Republicans have really good friends, people who are fighting the left, people really, really fighting the left, like, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has spent zero time fighting the left, but instead is making the rounds in order to go after President Trump, Speaker Johnson, continuing to undermine the party and receive the strange new respect so due to a woman who once famously posted about Jewish space lasers. Here we go.
Actually, I'm doing exactly what I've done the entire time. I ran for Congress in 2020, criticizing Republicans and Democrats equally. And one of my campaign lines was, I'll go to Washington and hold Republicans accountable. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do right now, is hold the Republican Party accountable to work for the American people on the promises that they made. I'm one of those Americans that feels disenfranchised by my government. And I feel that our government has failed the American people on both sides of the aisle.
Okay, so thanks. Yeah, that's super duper helpful. But at least you're getting your moment in the sun. Again, the rumor is that she wants to run for president. Good luck with that, Congresswoman Green, who would be completely obscure if it were not for President Trump, the president who she is currently attacking incessantly. All right, coming up, who is the leader of the Democratic Party? Democrats have legitimately no idea. First, let's talk about something that actually matters, honoring American veterans on Veterans Day. Legacy Box has been with the Ben Shapiro Show for years. They've helped preserve the memories of over 1 million families. Now they're teaming up with all of us here at the Daily Wire to give back in a big way. Legacy Box is donating 10 grand worth of legacy boxes to American veterans, so those incredible stories of service and sacrifice don't get lost to time. Here's where it gets personal. If there's a veteran in your family, head on over to get.dailywire.com/legacybox or click the link in the show notes. But even if you don't have a veteran in your life, you still have a legacy worth preserving. Right now, Legacy Box is giving all of my listeners exclusive access to this deal in honor of Veterans Day. Just $9 per tape to digitally preserve your family memories. Legacy Box is the world's largest digitizer. They've helped over 1 million families relive their most important moments, digitizing every tape, photo, and film reel by hand right in Chattanooga, Tennessee. If you order right now, you can still get your digitized memories back in time for the holidays so you can relive those precious moments as a family. You know, my family, my parents, we digitized a bunch of old film reels, and now I can see my grandparents, what my parents were like as kids. They can see memories that they haven't accessed for, 50 years. Whether it's a loved one in uniform or your family's holiday mornings, preserve the stories that shaped you. Head on over to legacybox.com/Shapiro today to preserve your family's history. That's legacybox.com/Shapiro. Also, here's the reality. Over 90% of Americans are not getting enough dietary fiber. Most of us aren't hitting that recommended variety of fruits and veggies either. I know I wasn't. That's why I tried Balance of Nature supplements. These aren't some artificial knockoff trying to mimic what nature provides. They simply let nature do its job. We're talking about 47 real ingredients: mango, wild blueberries, spinach, kale, shiitake mushrooms, broccoli, the works. Plus, their fiber and spice blend is also unique. It combines 4 whole fibers like psyllium husk and flaxseed with 12 aromatic spices, including turmeric and cinnamon. You're not going to find another supplement that does this. I also appreciate there are no artificial additives and no added sugars, just clean ingredients. They're vegan, kosher certified by the OU, and gluten-free. You can even mix the powder into smoothies or sprinkle it over food. No bags, no mess, no measuring. I use it wherever I go. I'm popping it right in the smoothies. It's helping keep me healthy, despite the fact I'm on planes all the time these days. After years of research and development, they've created something that makes getting proper nutrition actually convenient. Go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer. Plus, get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Shapiro. Well, meanwhile, Democrats are struggling on their side of the aisle, too. They don't know who their leader is. According to Politico, Democrats still don't have a leader to guide them out of the wilderness. So they did a poll conducted by Public First in the closing weeks of the election, and they found a complete lack of consensus among 2024 Kamala Harris voters on the question of who do you consider to be the leader of the Democratic Party? And the number one answer is don't know. 21% don't know. 16% still Kamala Harris. So that is not real. Okay. No one actually believes Kamala Harris is the leader of the Democratic Party. That just add that 16% also don't know. So you're 37% don't know. And then you also have to add another 11% nobody. So now you're talking about 48% don't know Kamala Harris, which is don't know, and nobody. So at least about half the Democratic Party has no idea who the leader of the Democratic Party is. About 8% say Hakeem Jeffries. About 7.5% say Chuck Schumer. About 7.5% say Barack Obama. The only person who is running for president who's on this list is Gavin Newsom, who's clocking in at 6.2%. Bernie is at 2%. Donald Trump is at 0.8%, which is hilarious. AOC is at 1%. So Democrats are fragmented. According to Lauren Harper Pope, Democratic strategist, she says the party is divided factionally and ideologically. I couldn't tell you who the leader of the Democratic Party is either, and I work in Democratic politics. Now, that's actually not a terrible place for the Democrats to be in one sense. Once they appoint a leader, that leader becomes the sort of chief of the opposition, and all Republican fire can focus on them. So if you say it's Mamdani, they're in trouble. If you say it's Spanberger, they're in trouble. So the best thing for them to do probably is for them to maintain a sort of confused status about the future, which is why it's, as a Republican, encouraging that one of the dumbest people in American politics, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who also for some reason seems to want to run for president based on the fact that he's a human existing in time, I suppose. He says that the future of the party is Mamdani.
I think the future of the party is Zoran and Abigail and Mikey, right? The future of the party is that we're a Big Ten party.
Okay, so that Big Tent is going to have to decide what exactly they are. What exactly are they going to be? And the answer is quite unclear at this point in time. The answer is unclear for the Democrats. He says the future is Zoran and also Abigail. And okay. It's a point I've been making about the right, and it's also true of the left. If you let the nuts run your party, you're opening the door to defeat, even when you seem on the verge of victory. Democrats could make a large-scale mistake by embracing Mamdaniism. Because how crazy is Zoran Mamdaniism? The Democrat Socialists of America have now put out a demand sheet articulating the organization's demands for Mamdani. Those demands include divest city pension funds from Israeli bonds and securities, withdraw city funds from banks that lend money to Israel or do business in Israel, end city contracts with companies that do business with Israel, operate city-run grocery stores free from Israeli products, investigate real estate agents hosting illegal sales of stolen lands in the West Bank, evict weapons manufacturers and transporters from the New York City metropolitan area, divest CUNY endowment and reinstate wrongly fired professors, dismantle Eric Adams' New York City Israel Economic Council, remove nonprofit status from any charity that raises funds for the IDF, end NYPD training with Israel, and arrest Benjamin Netanyahu and any active IDF soldier for war crimes. That is their list, which is psychotic. Every single one of their policies is about Israel. That's their list of demands. Their list of demands is not about free busing. Their list of demands is not about affordable housing. Their list of demands is just Jews. It's just Israel. The obsession is real and insane. And if Democrats decide to side with this sort of stuff, then good luck. Now, again, one of the things that I've seen, and you've seen this sort of, again, horseshoe around, is people who are claiming, well, you know, the thing that distinguished Zoran Mamdani from everyone else on the stage is that he said in a debate, I've heard this now from Anna Kasparian, I know that Tucker has said something similar, is that what distinguished Mamdani, the reason he won is because he said, I don't care what's happening in the Middle East, I only care what's happening here. Has ever a more gaslighting statement been made than that? What absolute nonsense. Zoran Mamdani is the most Israel-obsessed candidate in America. His entire political career was built on hatred of Israel. It's why he was a Students for Justice in Palestine activist. So Democrats, you know, I guess that you break it, you bought it, and I suppose you can enjoy the people with whom you have chosen to ride. We'll see how it works out for you. Meanwhile, the old guard in the Democratic Party is fading away. Nancy Pelosi, who was, I'm old enough to remember, the most left-wing member of the Democratic caucus and then became the speaker, and now she has been supplanted by people even further to her left, announced that she will not seek re-election.
I will not be seeking re-election to Congress. With a grateful heart, I look forward to my final year of service as your proud representative. As we go forward, my message to the city I love is this. San Francisco, know your power. We have made history. We have made progress. We have always led the way. And now we must continue to do so by remaining full participants in our democracy.
I think what I like most about that video is the Visiting Angels music underneath it. I mean, I feel like it's age appropriate for sure. But, you know, with her going, and one of the things that I think is funny, you're seeing Republicans, some people online saying, we pushed her out. Dude, she's been in Congress since before John F. Kennedy was born. Okay, like that lady has been in Congress since Charles Sumner was being caned on the floor of the Senate. She served in Congress with John Quincy Adams. Like, you didn't push her out. She left. Okay, can we just be real about that? But if there is a message to this in Democrats, that the old guard Democrats are in fact being supplanted by their crazies. And we'll see if that works out for them. I do not think that it will. The thing that scares me, of course, is that American politics is a reactionary game. Again, if the economy goes south, then the progressive nut jobs could actually win. But is this a smart move for Democrats? I think not. Well, someone else signed into chat about Nancy Pelosi. Marjorie Taylor Greene's Democrat apology tour continues. She was on CNN yesterday praising Nancy Pelosi, a person she once said was a traitor and guilty of treason. She's now praising Nancy Pelosi while ripping into Mike Johnson. What a great Republican she is, truly.
However, I will praise Nancy Pelosi. She had an incredible career for her party. Yes, things are going well. Okay, meanwhile, in actual good news,
New York has a candidate for governor on the Republican side, a very strong candidate, in fact, Elise Stefanik, Congresswoman from New York. She has now announced that she will be running for governor. Here was her campaign launch.
As a working mom, congresswoman, and fighter, Elise knows families need more help, and she'll make New York affordable. That's why she authored and passed the largest middle-class tax cut in New York's history, letting working families keep more of their hard-earned money. Elise will reduce your energy, utility, and grocery bills. She fought woke insanity in our schools, stood proudly with law enforcement, championed small businesses, and will never back down from fighting for New York families. With everything on the line, we need someone who will deliver results and make New York affordable and safe for families and small businesses to not just survive, but thrive. Elise Stefanik will clean up Kathy Hochul's catastrophe and restore New York's greatness. Elise Stefanik for governor. It's time to save New York.
Yeah, well, that's a good ad, and Elise Stefanik is a very strong candidate. Kathy Hochul put out her own ad attacking Stefanik. She didn't really attack the congresswoman as much as she attacked President Trump.
Meet Elise Stefanik.
The greatest president in the history of our country, President Donald J. Trump.
She's Donald Trump's top ally in Congress.
I'm proud to be one of his top allies on Capitol Hill. This goes back to fighting against the witch hunt impeachment. It goes back to being the first member of Congress who endorsed him.
Now Elise Stefanik is running for governor of New York to do what she's always done, put Trump first.
She is phenomenal. She is a friend of mine.
Phenomenal at putting Trump ahead of you. Like when she proudly cast the deciding vote to pass Trump's agenda that rips healthcare away from 1.5 million New Yorkers.
She's doing me a big favor.
Stefanik put 5 rural hospitals in her district on the chopping block just to keep Trump happy.
And I have been proud to be President Trump's top ally in Congress.
She voted to greenlight Trump's tariffs, too, even though they're hurting New York farmers and jacking up costs on everything from groceries to coffee to building and owning a home. And when the Trump administration tried to cut $187 million in counterterrorism funds from New York, Elise Stefanik didn't raise a finger or say a word. And New Yorkers noticed.
Elise Stefanik.
Elise Stefanik, she'll always put Donald Trump ahead of you.
So we'll see if that works. We'll see if that works for her. Just saying Trump over and over and over and over. Maybe it will, because obviously New York's a very blue state. But I don't know. I think that New Yorkers might fear a Kathy Hochul, Zoran Mamdani governing duo than they do, Elise Stefanik at the head of the New York governor's mansion. I think it'll be fascinating to find out. Joining us on the line is Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, who, of course, launched her campaign today. The polls show her essentially in a dead heat, maybe even slightly ahead of the current governor, Kathy Hochul, who is deeply unpopular in the state of New York. Congresswoman, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show.
Great to be with you, Ben. People are following this race very closely.
So let's talk about why you're jumping into the gubernatorial race. Obviously, New York has been a blue state in terms of the governorship for quite a while. What makes you think things are going to change?
Well, look at what just happened in New York City, Ben. The world was watching, and they elected a radical anti-Semite, defund the police, tax hiking, abolish private property socialist, who I call communist, Kami Mamdani. And Kathy Hochul bent the knee. She endorsed him, and he just slightly got above 50%. And traditionally in New York, which is outnumbered from Democrat to Republican 7-1, traditionally the Democrat nominee gets in the 70s. He did not, and nearly half New Yorkers opposed him. So they know that this reeling off a cliff is going to be a disaster for New York State. I also am running because the top issues for New York families are making New York affordable and safe. Kathy Hochul has made New York the most unaffordable state in the nation. We have the highest taxes, the highest energy prices, utility prices, grocery prices, rent, the list goes on. And we also have a crime crisis where you have failed bail reform, where under Kathy Hochul's failed leadership, They release violent criminals onto the streets who literally have killed New Yorkers. So those are the top issues. And I'll tell you, it's been 20 years next year since we've had a Republican governor. It is time. And this coalition will be not just Republicans and independents, but Democrats as well, who are fed up with the direction far left that is happening in New York.
And so, Congresswoman, obviously, you look at New York, as we say, has traditionally been Democratic, and that means that Kathy Hochul has decided she's going to run her reelection campaign on the basis of President Trump. Obviously, she's going to try and just say President Trump's name over and over and over in the hopes that because you have been in Congress a supporter of President Trump, this is somehow going to push her over the finish line as a piece of sort of anti-Trump backlash. What do you make of that line of attack, and how do you plan to talk about that?
Well, first of all, it's Kathy Hochul who's on the ballot, and we're going to hold her accountable for her record. And the reality is, let's dig into the facts. Kathy Hochul is an accidental governor. This is not someone who ran through when she first was governor a primary. She was elevated because Cuomo stepped down. She was a lieutenant governor, a do-nothing lieutenant governor, and a weak lieutenant governor. Cuomo knew that. That's why he selected her. And when she ran in 2022, she was unknown. Now she's known for her incompetency, for her weakness, and for this failed record. When it comes to her votes, she won 3.1 million votes in New York. President Trump actually won close to 3.4 million votes in New York State. So this is about turnout. It's about turning out lower propensity voters. We believe, I know that I've done that in my district. We have the highest turnout of any congressional district in New York State, and we're going to have to do that across New York. But you can feel the energy and enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Hochul can't triangulate between the radical far left socialists and maintaining her middle, which she has lost, and it's never coming back.
So obviously, as you say, that is a major issue for Kathy Hochul, because right now Zohran Mamdani has proclaimed that he has these massive plans for New York City. A huge number of them are reliant on the state of New York, the state legislature, and the governor actually signing off on incredibly large tax increases in the state. And it's unclear at this point whether Hochul is going to go for that. And so she's sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. If she attempts to raise taxes dramatically on people living in the state of New York, already one of the most overtaxed states in the country, then there will be a bit of a rebellion. If she does not, then presumably the progressive left is going to be deeply upset with her and maybe try to eat her alive. That is an unenviable political position for her.
Well, Ben, you're exactly right in your political assessment, but let's be clear. Kathy Hochul has already raised taxes on New Yorkers. She is the reason why we have the highest taxes in the entire nation. And it took less than 24 hours for Zohran Mamdani's supporters to heckle her, to chant tax the rich, to run her off the stage, for her to change her position and say she's now open to raising taxes. She will be forced by a Democrat-run state Senate, Democrat-run state assembly, with Mamdani and the DSA, the Democrat Socialists, on the march, to bend the knee. At every opportunity, Kathy Hochul bends the knee. She is controlled by the radical far left, by Mamdani, and she will do that in the case of raising taxes. This was the situation with her endorsement of Mamdani. She didn't intend to. She said she wasn't planning on endorsing, and then she did because of her bad polling. She's well under 50% among Democrat voters in New York State.
So when you look right now at the polling data, obviously there have been some variant polls that suggest she's ahead. There's one poll that suggests that you are actually ahead in this race. But the biggest factor here is the fact that she has never been a popular governor or even a gubernatorial candidate. In the last election cycle, in which Kathy Hochul ran against Lee Zeldin, who of course is now the head of the EPA, she only won in the state of New York by something like 5.5 points. And that was, in fact, an off-year election, just like this one will be. What do you make of the fact that it is an off-year election? Obviously, Republicans tend to turn out significantly more during presidential election years. Is that going to be a hindrance, or is it just going to be an opportunity for you to reach out to independents and moderate Democrats who may be put off by the radicalism of the current Democratic Party?
I think it's both, Ben. We're very focused on turning out those lower propensity voters. As I pointed out before, we've worked on this in my district. We have the highest voter turnout of any congressional district in New York State. People are looking for a leader and a reason to get out and vote. And saving New York State, I mean, this is dire. This is dire for families. And that's only exacerbated when you look at the New York City mayor's race. People do not want Kathy Hochul. She failed as governor. And these traditionally wouldn't be necessarily part of the Republican coalition. They're now coming on board. My phone's been ringing off the hook from Democrats who either voted for Hochul or supported Hochul financially in terms of donations and bundling. They are coming on board our team because she's left them far behind. So we view it as an opportunity to broaden the tent, reach out to new communities, and run up the score to save New York State once and for all.
Well, that is Elise Stefanik. She's a congresswoman from New York. Hopefully, she'll be the next governor of New York as well. Congresswoman, thanks so much for the time and congrats on the run. If people want to support your campaign, what's the best way to do so?
EliseForGovernor.com. They can follow me on social media at Elise Stefanik.
Well, again, thank you so much and good luck. Alrighty, folks, the show continues for our members right now. We'll be getting into the amazing Sydney Sweeney's interview. She did an interview with some crazy Hollywood press lady, and it really went poorly for that lady. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us. The British Broadcasting Corporation is in real trouble, melting down after serious allegations of lying, misconduct, and all the rest. We'll get into it. Plus, the government shutdown is coming to an end. Who won? Who lost? First, we have less than 2,000 Daily Wire lifetime memberships remaining. Turns out, having all access benefits for life with no renewals is something everyone wants. So here are your options. You could buy one while they're still available, or you could win mine. That's right. I have my very own lifetime membership to give away. I made it ridiculously easy to enter. Download that free Daily Wire Plus app in the App Store. Open it, tap follow under my picture. That's it. You are now entered. And who knows? I could be calling you to give you my personal lifetime membership. But before any of that happens, you need to download the Daily Wire Plus app and follow me inside it right now to enter to win. Well, folks, the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, is in dire straits. This is a state-funded enterprise in much the same way that NPR is a state-funded enterprise. And the BBC has been the dominant broadcast platform in the United Kingdom for legitimately decades, going all the way back to World War II. And for the last several decades, they have just been a left-wing agitprop organization. Well, now they are absolutely falling apart. And they are falling apart thanks to their extraordinary, dishonest attacks on President Trump. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump has now threatened to file a $1 billion lawsuit against the BBC over the way the UK state broadcaster edited one of his speeches in a documentary last year. The BBC chairman, a person named Samir Shah, had to apologize on Monday for the controversy, which has plunged the broadcaster into crisis. That apology came one day after BBC Director General Tim Davie and BBC News Chief Executive Deborah Turnus said they were leaving the organization following criticism from the White House. Now, what exactly happened here? Well, there was a news program. It's their flagship investigative news program over at the BBC. It's called Panorama, and it ran 1 week before the 2024 United States election. Now, you can say to yourself, did that affect the election? President Trump won. Doesn't matter. The job of the BBC is to actually cover the news, not make the news up. So what did they do? Well, 1 week before the election, they ran a piece in which they spliced together things that President Trump said on January 6th, 2021, to make it look as though he himself personally was leading an armed insurrection at the Capitol building. And that, of course, was not true. In order to achieve this effect, they had to cut out full-on 24 pages of material. They cut from one part of the speech, and then they fast-forwarded 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and cut together the last part of the speech and clipped those together, and then basically put in ellipses in order to make it seem as though President Trump himself was personally calling on people to follow him to the Capitol building and then to assault the Capitol building. Here is the BBC Panorama edit compared with the original clip.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Fast forward for 50 minutes.
We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Okay, well, again, that is insane. And if you watch that original clip, as you can see, they did it in edit. It looks as though Trump said those things directly one after another, and they had a music bed underneath which connects the first part of the statement to the last part of the statement. It is not as though they had some sort of interpolation from a narrator explaining that much later in the speech, President Trump said this. They didn't do any of that. Well, in a letter from Trump's lawyers, they are asking for $1 billion unless the documentary is retracted, an apology published, and compensation paid to the president. The broadcaster said in a statement it would respond in due course. This followed hard on a 19-page memo that was put out by a top staffer at the BBC. His name was Michael Prescott. He was an independent advisor to the BBC's Editorial Guidelines and Standards Board. And he wrote a 19-page memo pushing the idea that the BBC had become a biased and ridiculous organization. And here's what he wrote. Dear board members, you may know that I have been one of the 2 independent external advisors working alongside the EGSC. I held this role for 3 years and stood down in the summer. I departed with profound and unresolved concerns about the BBC since leaving. I've thought long and hard about what, if anything, to do about this. My conclusion is that these concerns are serious enough for me to draw them to your attention in your oversight role of the BBC. What follows is a summary of what were, in my view, some of the most troubling matters to come before the EGSC during my term. My view is that the executive repeatedly failed to implement measures to resolve highlighted problems and in many cases simply refused to acknowledge there was an issue at all. So he points out that there has been tremendous bias with regard to the U.S. election. He specifically points out that edit in the Panorama program. He said, quote, this was one of the most shocking sets of issues uncovered during my time with the EGSC. If BBC journalists are allowed to edit video in order to make people say things they never actually said, then what value are the corporation's guidelines? Why should the BBC be trusted? Where will all this end? And yet, top members of the staff said, quote, there was no attempt to mislead the audience about the content or nature of Mr. Trump's speech before the riot at the Capitol. It is a normal practice to edit speeches into short-form clips. Now, again, this was a repeated thing. So they did this with comments that President Trump made about Liz Cheney. There are reports in which the BBC routinely ignored its own guidelines, giving excessive coverage, for example, to that rogue Iowa poll. You remember right before the election, Ann Seltzer suggested that Kamala Harris was going to win the state by 97 points. And of course, President Trump won the state pretty easily. The coverage was ridiculous. This whistleblower said, quote, during my time as an advisor to the EGSC, it became clear the BBC fell too easily for putting out ill-researched material that suggested issues of racism when there were none. And then he just lists chapter and verse across the BBC in which they basically manufactured a bunch of racial issues where no racial issue existed. They went out of their way to promote idiocies about biological sex and gender, for example. Quote, the desk had been captured by a small group of people promoting the Stonewall view of the debate and keeping other perspectives off the air. Individual programs had come to lack their own reporters as a counterweight. There was a constant drip feed of one-sided stories, usually news features, celebrating the trans experience without adequate balance or objectivity. One example of this, by the way, might be a report that happened in 2024 from the BBC, in which the BBC reported that actually male breast milk was just as nutritious for babies as female breast milk. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is male breast milk? And the answer is that if you pump men full of estrogen, then you will get some secretions from the nipples. That is not actually like female breast milk. But the BBC had an interest in pretending that males can become females, and so they ran with this report.
Now, transgender woman's milk is just as good for babies as breast milk. That's according to a letter from the medical director at University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. The claim was made as part of a response against campaign groups. The trust referred to studies and the World Health Organization guidance, including one case which found what it called no observable effects in babies fed by induced lactation. Well, to discuss this in a bit more detail, I'm joined now by Kate Luxian, who is a research fellow in creative global health at the University College London and a lactation consultant trainee. I wanted to begin by getting your reaction to what we've heard from the hospital about this.
Of course, and it's actually not very new in terms of a concept or an idea. It's something, as someone who works in LGBT pregnancy and reproduction, that we've known for quite a while. There's studies back in the 90s that talk about the sameness of milk from the birth mother and then the co-lactating mother in terms of 10 days after birth. There's no difference seen there.
Now, again, this was then passed around all over the media. The Sunday Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail. Okay, the evidence, shall we say, that male quote-unquote milk, which are just secretions produced by pumping men filled with estrogen, that this is somehow comparable to female milk, is based on one study of one man who pumped himself full of hormones. And the BBC just ran with that. It's ridiculous. But this is what the BBC was, and that's what it is. And that's what so much of legacy media across the water and in the United States is. That's true on a wide variety of issues. It's particularly true about the Hamas Israel war. Already coming up, more on the BBC, plus the government shutdown and all the rest. First, it's the one time of year Birch Gold Group gives away free gold with every qualifying purchase. That's correct. For Black Friday, when you convert an existing IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold, Birch Gold will send free gold to your home for every 20 grand purchased. Look, gold started this year around $2,600 an ounce. By October, it was over $4,000 an ounce. Why? Well, because of global uncertainty. 2025 has been defined by trade wars. Central banks are pulling from the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency. Military tension is still building around the globe. Gold thrives in times of uncertainty, which is why I bought more this year. If you're looking to diversify your savings, Birch Gold can help you. Plus, now through November 28th, get free gold with a qualifying purchase. Just text my name, Ben, to 989898 to claim your eligibility for a free info kit on gold. But your opportunity for free gold with purchase ends on November 30th, so don't wait. Text Ben to the number 989898 for full details. Again, text Ben to 989898 to claim your eligibility and for that free info kit on gold. Also, here's the reality. Over 90% of Americans don't get enough dietary fiber. Most of us aren't hitting that recommended variety of fruits and veggies either. I know that I typically don't unless I use my Balance of Nature supplements. These aren't some artificial knockoff trying to mimic the stuff that nature provides. They simply let nature do its job. We're talking about 47 real ingredients: mango, wild blueberry, spinach, kale, shiitake mushrooms, broccoli, the works. Plus, their fiber and spice blend is also unique. It combines 4 whole fibers like psyllium, husk, and flaxseed with 12 aromatic spices, including turmeric and cinnamon. You're not going to find another supplement that does this. I also appreciate there are no artificial additives and no added sugars, just clean ingredients. They're vegan, kosher certified by the OU, and gluten-free. You can even mix the powder into smoothies or sprinkle it over food. No bags, no mess, no measuring. And I use Balance of Nature all the time. I'm on the road, not eating healthy. Got to pop that in the protein smoothie so I get at least something healthy during the day. After years of research and development, they've created something that makes getting proper nutrition convenient. Head on over to balanceofnature.com. Use promo code Shapiro for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer and get that free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com. Promo code Shapiro. According to the UK Telegraph, the BBC was forced to correct 2 stories every single week about the Gaza conflict since the October 7th attacks on Israel. 2 stories a week, okay, which is insane. It's like, how many stories can you retract before you finally lose all credibility? BBC Arabic had to make 215 corrections and clarifications over the past 2 years on stories that were found to be biased, inaccurate, or misleading. According to the UK Telegraph, the figures follow a week of revelations by the Telegraph of one-sided reporting at the BBC, disclosing in an 8,000-word dossier compiled by a whistleblower that BBC Arabic was choosing to minimize Israeli suffering in the war in Gaza to paint Israel as the aggressor. I mean, why did this happen? Well, the answer is because the BBC despises Israel. And they can't make this any clearer. It's not possible for them to make it any clearer. For example, here is the BBC editor, Jeremy Bowen. This is in November 2023. He falsely reported that Israel had blown up the Al-Ahli hospital in the Gaza Strip, and it was just not true. It was not true at all. He admits he got it wrong, but says he doesn't feel bad at all that he got it wrong. Like at all. He did a great job. Here we go.
Tell us what happened that night and, bluntly, where were you getting your information and do you regret anything that you said that night?
So it broke in, I suppose, mid-evening. And to answer your question, no, I don't regret one thing in my reporting because I think I was measured throughout. I didn't race to judgment.
But you said that building had been flattened.
Oh yeah, well I got that wrong because I was looking at the pictures and what I could see was a square that appeared to be flaming on all sides, and there was a sort of a void in the middle, and I think it was a picture taken from a drone. And so, we have to piece together what we see. And I thought, well, that looks like the whole building's gone. And that was my conclusion from looking at the pictures, and I was wrong on that. But I don't feel particularly bad about that.
He doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel bad at all, because this is the way the BBC operates. They start with the conclusion, and then they backfill the news in order to reach that particular conclusion. So is it any surprise that the BBC is a disaster area or that they're in serious trouble now? No, it is not. And it is long past time for the BBC to admit what it is, which is an agitprop organization on behalf of the political left. They have been for decades. Nothing has changed. And this latest brouhaha is just more evidence that actually actually, the government should not be subsidizing media organizations like an NPR or like a PBS, or in Britain, like the BBC, because you just end up with left-wing media sponsored by taxpayers. Okay, meanwhile, closer to home, it appears that the shutdown is basically done. According to the Washington Post, the Senate passed a bill to reopen the federal government on Monday evening, taking the next step toward ending the longest shutdown in American history. The chamber had already agreed to speed up the process to pass a bipartisan agreement struck over the weekend. Senate Majority Leader Thune said, "I could spend an hour talking about all the problems we've seen, which have snowballed the longer the shutdown has gone on. But all of us, Democrat and Republican, who voted for last night's bill are well aware of the facts. I'm grateful that an end is in sight." The bill passed 60-40, with 7 Democrats plus Angus King, who's an independent who caucuses with the Democrats from Maine, joining Republicans to pass it. Senator Rand Paul, who votes no on literally everything, also voted no. President Trump is expected to sign the bill into law. It will not extend the ACA subsidies, the Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year. And let's be clear, the Obamacare subsidies are the only thing, basically, that keeps Obamacare solvent. Obamacare relies on these subsidies because Obamacare itself is kind of a bleep show. Very few people are ever going to reach their full deductible under Obamacare. They're just going to pay in tens of thousands of dollars to these Obamacare systems. Many doctors don't even take Obamacare, so you don't get the doctor that you want. You're paying too much money unless you have the federal government subsidizing you. It was always a backdoor nationalization of the healthcare system scheme, Obamacare. And when Republicans say no, Democrats complain. They created the system, but somehow it's Republicans who are to blame. Well, President Trump celebrated the end of the shutdown yesterday. Here he was approving of the deal.
Do you personally approve of the deal that's happening right now on Capitol Hill to end the government?
Well, it depends what deal we're talking about. But if it's a deal I heard about, that's certainly, they want to change the deal a little bit. But I would say so. I think based on everything I'm hearing, they haven't changed anything. And we have support from enough Democrats. And we're going to be opening up our country. It's too bad it was closed, but we'll be opening up our country very quickly.
Yesterday, the president put out a statement about air traffic controllers who are not showing up to work because presumably they're not being paid. Maybe they're afraid they won't get paid. He said all air traffic controllers must get back to work now. Anyone who doesn't will be substantially docked. He said that he would recommend air traffic controllers who didn't take off time during the shutdown receive a $10,000 per person bonus, according to the Wall Street Journal. When he was asked where the money would come from by Fox News' Laura Ingraham, he said, "I don't know, I'll get it someplace," which, not my favorite answer when it comes to funding of government-based programs. By the way, just another case that we actually should privatize our airports. I see no reason why the taxpayer should be on the dime for airports, which are eminently privatizable. You could absolutely privatize the airports. You could have airlines chip in for their own security and work with a system together to ensure the planes don't hit each other in the sky. In any case, that's another issue. The bottom line is that the Democrats caved here pretty clearly, and President Trump wins. And you can see that President Trump wins because Democrats are really ticked at each other. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, he applauded Democrats voting to end the shutdown yesterday. Here he was.
This is genuine. I mean this sincerely. We applaud the 7 Senate Democrats and 1 independent senator who did the right thing. They decided to put principle over their personal politics. And my urgent plea of all my colleagues in the House, and that means every Democrat in the House, is to think carefully, pray, and finally do the right thing and help us to bring an end to the pain of the American people.
So, again, he's right about all of that. Democrats are stuck between a rock and a hard place because basically the only concession they got from Republicans was a commitment to do a vote on Obamacare subsidies. They will lose that vote, by the way. And that was offered by John Thune very early on in the shutdown, actually. So now Dick Durbin, Senate Minority Leader's deputy, he's the number 2 in the Senate for the Democrats. He's out there saying the GOP must keep their word. Well, the GOP can keep their word and they can still win.
I've served in the Senate for 29 years, and I've never seen that kind of offer from a Senate majority. During the historic roll call last night, I walked across the aisle and met with Senator John Thune, the Republican leader. I told him that I was counting on him to keep his word on this agreement. He assured me he would.
Okay, now, again, that's not a big win. They're going to try and play it as a big win for their constituents. It probably won't work. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who voted also to end the shutdown, he's trying to claim that now they'll really be able to put the screws to the Republicans on more Obamacare subsidies.
So now we're going to pay federal workers. We're going to untangle the chaos in air traffic. We're going to make sure SNAP beneficiaries get what they desperately need every day. And then we'll have a fight, Katie, about health care on the main stage, in the spotlight, without the background noise of all the shutdown effects and consequences drowning out the high stakes of the healthcare fight. I think it's a fight we could win.
Now, again, Democrats don't even believe this, so they are ticked. They are really ticked, especially those who have 2028 aspirations. According to Axios, many congressional Democrats are not on board with that Senate deal. Democrats are once again divided. The shutdown deal didn't extend healthcare subsidies, of course. The Senate ultimately settled for nothing more than a promise of a vote. They got an extension of government funding through January 30th, funding for food stamps through fiscal year 2026, and the reversal of those federal worker layoffs that President Trump had done during the shutdown. Democrats are ticked. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffrey is against the deal. Many are calling for Schumer to step down. Here's Bernie Sanders, who again has the luxury of being able to be wrong about everything because he's never been empowered to implement his garbage policies. And basically his popularity rests on his policies never being tried. Here's Bernie Sanders yelling at the shutdown being ended.
Look, I think it was a terrible, terrible vote. At a time when we have a broken healthcare system, this is going to make our healthcare system even worse. And that vote last night paves the way for 15 million people to be thrown off Medicaid. What are they going to do? Many of them are going to die. So that was a really bad vote that took place last night.
Speaking of Medicaid and healthcare outcomes, I asked our sponsors at Comet, a new web browser by Perplexity, aren't there studies suggesting Medicaid has not actually improved healthcare outcomes? And what Comet says is mixed findings from research. The Oregon Health Insurance Experiment found Medicaid improved self-reported health and reduced depression, but did not show statistically significant improvements in key clinical outcomes like blood pressure, blood sugar control, or cholesterol levels. Some long-term analyses suggest Medicaid expansion produced temporary gains in self-reported and mental health, but these improvements diminished over several years, leading to little durable difference in direct health metrics between recipients and non-recipients. So, again, the question of whether Medicaid has actually translated into sustained improvement in physical health, that is a very hot topic. There is no clear evidence that it does. Yeah, this is not an argument Medicaid shouldn't exist, but the idea that Medicaid as a general proposition has been wildly beneficial to the health of Americans is unsubstantiated by the actual data. When Bernie Sanders keeps saying things like tens of thousands will die, that is precisely the sort of catastrophic language that leads to people, chanting Bernie Sanders slogan while they shoot up congressional baseball games in Virginia. That happened just a few years ago. Bernie hasn't stopped one moment to think about that. Meanwhile, Pete Buttigieg, who continues to try to make himself a thing, the failed Secretary of Transportation, who's mostly famous for, doing nothing about a train crash in East Palestine, Ohio, as well as, planes having their wings fall off and such. Well, now he's back because he wants to run for president. Quote, "It's a bad deal. Everyday life, making it better and more affordable must always be our bottom line. For months, I've been hearing from people bracing for their health insurance bills to skyrocket so much that some will lose coverage altogether. Some say they simply haven't even opened their letter yet, dreading the bad news. Any deal that fails to address this directly is a bad deal." Now, again, this was Democrats holding up the government, not running on this basis. By the way, this would be probably a solid political line for them to run on. But that's not what they did. They decided to hold up the government and make people suffer in order to achieve absolutely nothing to elevate a talking point. That's what actually just happened over the course of the last 6 weeks or so. Alrighty, coming up, Chuck Schumer under fire for caving to the Republicans. What does that mean for the future of the Democratic Party? Also, if you are ever worried about the safety of your home, you need to hear about Simply Safe and their early access Black Friday sale. Traditional security systems only respond after someone has already broken into your home, but Simply Safe works differently. With ActiveGuard outdoor protection, AI-powered cameras can detect threats while intruders are still outside and immediately alert real security agents who spring into action. Here's what makes this a true game changer. Those agents don't just watch. They actively confront the intruder in real time, speaking directly to them through the camera to let them know they're being watched, that police are on the way, and if necessary, triggering a loud siren and spotlight. While other systems have cameras that let you talk to intruders yourself, they depend on you seeing the alert in the first place. Simply Safe's monitoring agents have your back 24/7, confronting threats even when you're not available, which means they can actually stop crimes before they happen. We've got Simply Safe here at the studio, so we're not worried that our cameras are going to be someplace we didn't leave them when we come in the next morning. Plus, there are no long-term contracts or hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. It's no wonder they've been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. News & World Report for 5 years running. Don't miss out on Simply Safe's biggest sale of the year, 60% off right now. our listeners can save 60% off on a Simply Safe home security system at simplysafe.com/Shapiro. That's simplysafe.com/Shapiro. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Also, when we started Daily Wire, it felt like we had to figure everything out with minimal help. Editorial guidelines, studio setup, production schedule, branding. It was overwhelming. New decisions were needed every single day. Finding that one tool that simplifies everything when starting a business becomes a game changer and a lifesaver. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. We even use it for our own Daily Wire shop to make sure things are running smoothly and efficiently so you can get all the goods. Well, you might be asking, what if I can't design a website? Or I'm worried people haven't heard of my brand. Not a problem. That's why Shopify is there. They've got you covered from the start with beautiful, ready-to-go templates that match your brand style and help you find your customers through easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. And if you need a hand with everyday tasks, their AI tools created specifically for commerce can help enhance product images, write descriptions, and more. Plus, their award-winning customer support is available 24/7 to share advice if you ever get stuck. Turn those dreams into and give them the best shot at success with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Shapiro. That's shopify.com/Shapiro. Shopify.com/Shapiro. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer under serious fire. Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona was asked directly about Chuck Schumer's handling of all of this, and he bobbed and weaved like Ali in his prime.
I wonder if, as a result, you believe Chuck Schumer's leadership is in jeopardy, and should it be?
Well, as I've said, Chris, we are dealing with an irrational president. I know people are frustrated. You know, people could be frustrated with leadership in the Senate and the House. I'm frustrated with the White House.
Okay, well, congrats, dude. Meanwhile, Hakeem Jeffries, who opposes the deal, still says that Chuck Schumer is effective. And again, here is the problem, is that Democrats are in the unenviable position of having to pander to their extremely radical base, while at the same time trying to fend off that radical base from taking control of the party. And that's where Hakeem Jeffries is.
Some Democrats in your own caucus are suggesting Schumer is ineffective as Senate Democratic leader and should be replaced. You, of course, are critical of this deal. Do you view him as effective, and should he keep the job?
Yes and yes.
Meanwhile, Congressman Seth Moulton, who's attempting to outflank Senator Ed Markey in Massachusetts, he's been moving pretty steadily to the left, Seth, in order to presumably garner the love of the progressive base. He says it's time for Chuck Schumer to move on.
I'm not going to run on a new generation of leadership platform here in Massachusetts and then go down to Washington and vote for the status quo. And so I've been very public about that. Again, respect his service, but time to move on. And my opponent has not. He keeps dodging the question.
So, again, I think that this is the battle inside the Democratic Party pretty clearly. And it's being egged on from outside by geniuses like Whoopi Goldberg and the ladies of The View. Here was Whoopi Goldberg trashing the compromise last night. Of course, it doesn't matter to her. She's not a person who's reliant on food stamps. She's not a person who is reliant on being paid as a member of the TSA. She has really generous health care, I would assume, from ABC's The View. And, of course, she has millions and millions of dollars in the bank. Here's Whoopi Goldberg doing the virtue signaling thing.
50-50 chance of negotiating health care subsidies. I just remember all of the people who are coming in and hoping that people would vote them in and say, yes, you can be this person, or you can be a judge, or you can be this. And they all said, no, we're not going to mess with anything. No, we're going to leave everything as it was. I have no faith that they're going to negotiate and come back to the table. And I'm glad that folks, maybe, because, again, we have seen, you say this is going to happen, and then it doesn't happen. And, people will get rehired, supposedly, federal workers, and reinstate SNAP benefits, but a 50-50 chance of extending the subsidies, I don't believe it.
So, again, we will see whether the Democratic Party decides to cave to all of this. You're seeing this battle break out into the open in New York, of course, where Kathy Hochul has been slamming the brakes on Zohran Mamdani's insane proposals. So, again, she is in a neck-and-neck battle with Elise Stefanik for governorship of New York. And she is very much afraid that if she does what Zohran Mamdani wants, it'll absolutely crater her gubernatorial chances in her reelect effort. So yesterday, she tried to slam the brakes on Zohran Mamdani's nonsense. According to the New York Post, Hochul, speaking during a press conference at the Somos political retreat in Puerto Rico on Saturday, argued she's already put vast sums of money into the perpetually cash-strapped MTA for major projects. She said, we're spending a lot of money, so I can't set forth a plan right now that takes money out of the busing system that relies on the fares of the buses and the subways. Can we find a path to make it more affordable for people who need help? Of course we can. Meanwhile, Zohran Mamdani tried to avoid direct conflict with Hochul because he's going to lose. He said, I continue to be excited at the work of making the slowest buses in America fast and free, and I appreciate the governor's continued partnership in delivering on that agenda of affordability. Again, one of my bugaboos here is that in our politics, if you just say the problem over and over and over, people then give you credibility, which is ridiculous. If you have bad solutions, you labeling the problem does not help in any way, shape, or form. Meanwhile, by the way, the downstream effects of the Mamdani election are being felt, according to the Daily Wire. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is now recruiting NYPD officers disgruntled by the election of Zohran Mamdani. With a flood of cash from President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, the agency has set a goal to recruit 10,000 new officers to turbocharge the historic deportation campaign. New York City officers, already hamstrung by local sanctuary policies, are expected to face new hurdles with Mamdani in charge. So ICE put out a tweet yesterday, and it said, NYPD officers, defend your family, defend your city, defend the homeland, join ICE. ICE is already offering retired law enforcement officers up to $50,000 in recruitment bonuses, and they've received, apparently, at the DHS, more than 200,000 applications already. It'll be interesting to see what happens as the New York City Police Department empties out in favor of greener pastures. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party, again, there is no too radical for the Democratic Party. One of the hilarious internecine wars that is currently happening inside the Democratic Party is a war that happened in Minneapolis between Jacob Frey, who is the insanely left-wing mayor of Minneapolis. You remember him from kneeling in front of the George Floyd casket. You remember the masking and the riots and all that from 2020. And he was taking on Omar Fateh. Omar Fateh, of course, is Somali in origin and came very close to beating Jacob Frey. And apparently, one of the reasons that Jacob Frey won is that he actually identified inside the Somali community clans that didn't like other clans and then proceeded to target them for voting, which led Ilhan Omar, another person elected by the Somali community, to suggest that Somalis who didn't support her or Fateh should be expelled. I mean, you want to talk about tribal politics happening inside the Democratic Party? Here we go. She says when a Somalian person becomes an enemy, they become a serious one. There are people like that living right here in our city. We all see them. Some of us try to dismiss it, saying, oh, that person just talked too much. It doesn't mean anything. Or leave them alone. That's my relative. You've probably met them in coffee shops. You know exactly the kind of people I'm talking about. You've sat with them at Starbucks. Maybe you've seen them once in a while at the mosque. Maybe you've gone to parties together. You know who I mean. You've seen them. We need to get rid of these people. Man, politics here in the United States is going so well. I'm glad that we imported vast populations of people who are, so tribal that Ilhan Omar is able, on the basis of tribal identity alone, not even some sort of broader religious or ideological rubric, to sort of separate them out. Pretty impressive stuff right there happening in Minnesota. Meanwhile, it's not as though the infighting is not happening on the right as well. Marjorie Taylor Greene is attempting to lead an insurgency to take away control of MAGA from President Trump. Good luck with that to the congresswoman from Georgia, who would be a complete unknown were it not for President Trump and some media figures who have touted her beyond all intellectual capacity. President Trump yesterday went after MTG, who has spent the last several weeks on a slam Trump tour with mainstream media voices.
So when somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's now catering to the other side, I don't know what, I guess she's, got some kind of vernacular, but I'm surprised at her. But when somebody like Marjorie goes over and starts making statements like that, it shows she doesn't know. I don't devote a lot of my time.
Okay, so, again, the president is right about this. The only thing the president is missing is that it is obviously planned and it is also malign. The reason that Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing this is not because she has lost her way. It's because she has found her way, and her way is to undermine President Trump's coalition on behalf of her own parochial interests. That is what she is doing. She's been doing it for literally months. There's already a game that is being played by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene to try and seize control of the MAGA movement away from President Trump and redefine it in a direction that she chooses. It is a thing that is clearly going on. And the president should know that because that is what is happening here. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene then responded by telling Caitlin Collins of CNN, I haven't lost my way. I'm 100% America first and only. Again, there are rumors that she wants to run for president, to which I say absolutely she should. And we'll find out how popular her program is. I would suggest not all that popular. Okay, meanwhile, the president continues to be battered around on issues of affordability because affordability, of course, is the word of the day. And yes, Americans are deeply concerned about affordability. As the New York Times points out, President Trump has mentioned the word affordability as much in the last week as he has in the past 9 months. His renewed attention to the issue comes after weeks in which he faced mounting criticism for appearing out of touch with everyday Americans. So Democrats have been trying to make the case that President Trump is not paying attention to affordability. President Trump has fought back by claiming that inflation is way down under his presidency, which of course is true, is way up under Joe Biden. It is reduced, but it is not ended by any stretch of the imagination. A Washington Post ABC News Ipsos poll recently found that a majority of Americans say they are currently spending more on groceries and utilities than they were a year ago. Only 30% of voters believe President Trump has lived up to their expectations for tackling inflation and the cost of living. And of course, it is Marjorie Taylor Greene who's leading the charge, not because she cares about affordability, but because she wishes, again, to attack the president. She said, I go to the grocery store myself. Grocery prices remain high. Energy prices are high. My electricity bills are higher here at Washington, D.C., at my apartment. They're also higher at my house in Rome, Georgia, higher than they were a year ago. Now, again, the ways that you actually bring affordability into view: freer trade, less regulation, lower taxes. That makes things more affordable. But the president, again, seems very wedded to his tariff regimen. And the tariffs are not particularly hitting tech. Okay, tech, because tech is transnational and it is less wedded to location than many other businesses in the United States, the tariffs just don't hit NVIDIA in the same way. They don't hit Tesla in the same way because Tesla's valuation is not as much predicated on the number of cars that it sells as it is on the expectation that Elon Musk is using all of the data that he's gathering to build new types of robotics and new types of AI. So what does that mean? It means all the gains are going to the tech companies at the top of the market and all the sort of mainstream American companies that actually rely on inputs and then being able to export. Those are the ones that are being hurt. Nonetheless, President Trump is out there warning of a national security disaster if the Supreme Court shoots down the tariffs. Here he was yesterday.
We have AI factories. We're leading China by a lot. We have cars and, car plants coming in by more than we've ever had built before. All of that would go away if we lose the tariff case. So all of it would go away. So they're not giving the right numbers. It would be an economic disaster. It would be a national security disaster if we lost the case in the Supreme Court.
Okay, now, I think the markets would react a very different way than President Trump suggests. If the Supreme Court were to strike down the tariffs, yeah, there would be another round of uncertainty, but at least the president wouldn't be able to sort of just blanket tariff the entire world. So my guess is the economy would actually rebound in the face of such a decision by the Supreme Court. Alrighty, time for some fast facts. We begin with more on the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court has now rejected a call to overturn Obergefell. Obergefell, of course, is the Supreme Court case that established essentially a national right to same-sex marriage. That case is wrongly decided. It is an egregious violation of the constitutional text. But the Supreme Court did not want to take it up. That is not a surprise. Even in the Dobbs case, which overthrew Roe versus Wade, there was a footnote from Justice Kavanaugh in which he explicitly said, basically, we're not going to take up Obergefell. The reason those two cases were supposedly linked is because the right to abortion that theoretically existed under Roe versus Wade was predicated on a broader right to privacy, and that same right to privacy, which was, again, based in a notion known as substantive due process, which, again, is a nonsensical notion. That entire concept is also the basis for the idea that there is a right to same-sex marriage implicit in the Constitution of the United States, which is totally insane. There is no such right implicit in the Constitution of the United States. Now, that does not mean that on a public policy level, that there should be laws against gay people living together or people doing what they want in the privacy of their own homes. That is a pragmatic and moral consideration that each state should go through at its own behest. But the idea that there's a federal right for a man to marry a man is, of course, ridiculous and violates the Constitution. The Supreme Court, however, does not want to touch it. That is not a particular shock since same-sex marriage has been embedded into the fabric of the society for 10 years and probably 20 if you go back to Massachusetts starting to perform these sorts of marriages. Her lawyers, the lawyers for Kim Davis, are the ones who sued. She, of course, was the former Kentucky court clerk who refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples after that 2015 ruling in Obergefell. She'd been trying to get the court to overturn a lower court order for her to pay $360,000 in damages and attorney's fees to a couple denied a marriage license. Her lawyers repeatedly invoked the words of Justice Clarence Thomas, who has called for erasing the same-sex marriage ruling on the basis of, the thing called the Constitution. So, again, there's probably some support on the court for overthrowing Obergefell, but certainly not enough. For example, Justice Amy Coney Barrett has said that same-sex marriage might not be in the same sort of category with regard to right to privacy as abortion because people have relied on the decision when they married and then had kids. And the bottom line here is that, again, the chances the Supreme Court was going to touch this were always extremely, extremely low. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court is poised to hear a major challenge to mail-in ballot laws, according to the New York Times. They will hear a challenge to Mississippi's counting of mail-in ballots received after Election Day. So first of all, if you mail in your ballot and it is received after Election Day, tough luck. This is ridiculous. This notion, first of all, that we should be doing vast mail-in balloting in the United States weeks in advance of an election is totally crazy. It used to be called Election Day. It is now election season. And if you waited until Election Day to mail your ballot because you were too lazy to go to a polling place, and then it's received 3 days later, tough luck. There are lots of reasons we invalidate ballots in this country. You marked them improperly. You wrote your name down wrong. There are lots of reasons why your ballot might not count. If you don't abide by the rules, then that is what it is. If you don't abide by the rules, I'm not sure why the rules have to change to accommodate you. That's silly. Because otherwise, you're opening the door to widespread voter intimidation and voter fraud. The case is a potential blockbuster, according to the New York Times, that asks the justices to determine the meaning of Election Day. The challenge to the Mississippi law reflects political fights over the increased use of mail-in ballots, which exploded during the COVID pandemic. In 2024, the RNC, along with the Mississippi Republican Party and individual voters, challenged Mississippi's mail-in ballot rules. The challengers argued Congress had intended voting take place on a single election day, and allowing ballots to arrive days later and still be counted undermined election integrity and the public's trust in the vote. I mean, obviously that's true. Obviously that's true. Now, again, they're claiming that as long as the ballot was postmarked by Election Day, you should be okay. That is the counterclaim. The problem is, do you want your elections to carry on for days on end? Is that a thing that we want to incentivize? And the answer there is pretty clearly no. And meanwhile, on the foreign policy front, we have now been treated to the bizarre spectacle of a terrorist who put on a suit, and now we're supposed to pretend that he's no longer a terrorist in any way. I understand that relations with Syria are complex. After the fall of Bashar Assad, which again, I said at the time, was going to open a huge number of problems, as well as the possibility of future opportunities. Well, both those things have been true. The person who ended up taking over was a former Al-Qaeda and ISIS terrorist. That person, whose name is Ahmed al-Shara'a, he decided to visit the White House yesterday. Syria, the United States is trying to broker some sort of deal between Syria and Israel. The Turks basically run Syria at this point. The sort of great unmentioned elephant in the room in the Middle East right now is not Iran, it's not Israel, it's not Saudi, it's Turkey. Turkey has been spreading its wings, attempting to extend the range of its neo-Ottoman empire through Syria. There's no question that's what Turkey has been doing. Erdogan is, in fact, a radical Islamist who supports terrorism throughout the region. The fact that Turkey is a member of NATO is insane, totally insane. And so the matter in Syria has become complicated because militias, largely backed by the Syrian government, or at least with the Syrian government looking the other way, those militias have been going in and slaughtering Druze in the south of Syria. The state of Israel, which of course has a large Druze population, has been attempting to defend the Druze because the Druze, again, being quite tribal, are willing to literally walk over the border to Syria and just start fighting on behalf of their brothers. And so things are pretty complicated over in Syria. With that said, there are possible openings in Syria if the United States is willing to tell the Turks to back down. According to the Wall Street Journal, Syria has now joined the U.S.-led mission to defeat ISIS. The move marks a significant turnaround in the U.S. relationship with Syria. The decision is a sign of Syria's transition from a driver of Middle East instability as a result of former President Bashar al-Assad's violent crackdown on his own people, which allowed ISIS to flourish, into an ally aiding an American-led military operation to keep ISIS at bay. There's talk about opening embassies in the capital of Damascus, or Syria reopening its embassy in Washington, D.C. The president met with this person who, again, was a terrorist and has terrorist sympathies. Can he be turned around? We're going to find out in very, very short order. Trump's special envoy for Syria, Tom Barrack, has traveled to Damascus twice in the past 6 weeks. Andrew Tabler, an expert on Syria at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, said Trump went all in with Sharia. They see it as an opportunity to reorient Syria away from U.S. adversaries like Iran and toward Washington, the Arab Gulf, and Turkey. This is big stuff. Well, I mean, again, that is treating Turkey, I think, with a little more respect than Turkey deserves at this point, given its support for, again, Hamas in the Gaza Strip and its openly Islamist attempts to turn its regime from a secularist regime into a Sharia regime under Erdogan. This is complicated stuff. I do not envy the president attempting to work things out in Syria. We'll have to see, again, whether Syria turns into yet another failed terror state or whether they are held to account by the West. And meanwhile, in a piece of salutary news, the IOC has now decided to ban transgender women, meaning men, from all female Olympic events. That would be the International Olympic Committee. This has become, of course, a very hot issue given the fact that last time at the Olympics, men were fighting women in boxing. According to the New York Post, the International Olympic Committee is reportedly set to ban trans women from competing in all female categories. The change is set to be officially announced early next year. The decision to overhaul the current policy was made after the Sporting Committee carried out a science-based review of a biologically born male's physical advantages. The report claimed there were clear advantages with athletes who had disorders of sexual development, which is essentially people who have intersex conditions, for example. So now the idea is that women will be competing with women, which of course is a good thing. It is unbelievable that it took an entire cultural revolution in the United States in order to say what is perfectly obvious. But again, that's sort of the way that things work here in the United States these days, is that saying the perfectly obvious has now become a matter of serious controversy. Meanwhile, Michelle Obama is out there and she is complaining about life. It is amazing. Again, the number of people in this country who complain about the United States, like qua United States, who lives the most privileged lives imaginable, is really an amazing, amazing thing. Whether it is Zohran Mamdani, who has lived a life of tremendous privilege here in the United States, or whether it is Michelle Obama, the capacity of the left to be utterly ungrateful about the virtues of America is pretty incredible. So Michelle Obama, she has been complaining about a couple of things. One, she's complaining about the tearing down of the East Wing, which, again, like the fact that Democrats keep trying to make this an issue is beyond me. Okay, I mean, like, really, man. Well, if she wasn't complaining about the East Wing, she's just complaining generally about how hard her life is. Because if you think of a person who's had a hard life in America, Michelle Obama definitely comes to mind. If you're an insane person.
I didn't really have that choice as First Lady. Of course, right? Yeah. Every day, every time I was up, as we called it, I was up for the public. Yes. And the days were long. So as you mentioned, to save time. Yes. I know having a glam team, a trifecta, it feels like a luxury, but it was a time necessity.
Yes.
There's absolutely no way that I would be able to do my hair and makeup and have clothes ready that fit, because rare is the woman that can live off the rack.
Well, probably we need socialism then. I mean, I guess that's so simultaneously socialism good, and also I need my glam team. That is definitely, again, the sort of limousine liberalism we used to condemn. It is very much alive and well. Apparently, the Kimmel family is now going around complaining about their life as well. Jimmy Kimmel's wife, Molly McNerney, she appeared on a podcast recently with Jimmy Kimmel talking about how hard it was to be temporarily fired. And he was temporarily fired again, as you recall, because he made a really stupid and terrible reference about Charlie Kirk, suggesting, of course, that the right had been responsible for Charlie's murder. And then places like Sinclair Broadcasting said that they didn't want any part of it. And then eventually he came back after a quasi-apology. Well, apparently they had to talk a lot to this podcaster about how rough it was.
There's helicopters over our house and madness outside. And Jimmy said, well, we're going to have to tell them because our daughter's in 5th grade and kids talk. And so we sat them down on the couch And we told them, we said, I believe Jimmy started the conversation, and we realized in that moment that any other time we've sat them down to talk about something, I guess it's been good, because Jimmy said, we want to talk to you guys about something. And Jane, our 11-year-old, went, oh my gosh, Julie, they have to talk to us about something. And she's like, get in here, get in here. And I think the last time we had done that, we surprised them with Disneyland or something. So they seemed like it was going to be good. And it occurred to me, oh boy, this is not going to be good. And Jimmy let them know. He said, my show has been suspended. And our daughter immediately burst into tears. Oh. And she said, I'll sell my Labubu's. And we told her, yeah, you should. No, we did not. We told her, no, you don't need to do that. You don't need to sell Labubu's. And our son asked if the president had done this. Oh. And we looked at each other, and we didn't quite know how to answer that question.
Okay, so I have a general rule, okay? As a politically active person, shall we say, who comes under a lot of fire, don't do this to your kids. Like, really don't do this to your kids. Like, it sounds like their kids, if your kid is young enough to ask whether the Labubus should be sold, you should not be having these conversations with your kids. It's just a piece of parental advice. As someone with 24/7 security all the time, with an enormous amount of this kind of stuff going on in my life, just don't, your kids don't need to know this is for you and your spouse. Again, because the reality is we all have vicissitudes in our life, but people in my place, people in Jimmy's place, we're some of the most privileged people on the planet in history of humanity. And so trying to, create angst with your kids is a mistake, shall we say, or giving the ability for your kid, creating angst in your kids this way. I would suggest that it's not the proper way of handling this sort of stuff. Okay. I do want to take a moment to note, of course, that it is Veterans Day. We are so grateful to everyone who is serving and who has served in the United States Armed Forces. An unbelievable sacrifice made by so many and continuing to be made by so many people. And in honor of Veterans Day, I want to make a cultural recommendation. It is my favorite series of all time, probably the best thing that has ever aired on television or on movie screen for that matter. Go watch Band of Brothers. If you've never seen Band of Brothers, which is the story of the 101st Airborne, it's available on HBO, starring Damian Lewis and a bunch of other character actors who you will recognize when you see their faces. It is the best thing that's ever been on TV. It follows the 101st Airborne all the way from training through the liberation of Germany. It is a fabulous piece of work. It is absolutely spectacular. It is worth every moment. Your kids probably need to be about 14 to watch it. It's got the same level of carnage, maybe a little bit less than Saving Private Ryan. But it is beautifully shot. It is beautifully written. It is beautifully acted. And it is an amazing window into what it was like to serve in World War II. Again, probably the best thing in the history of television. And a good way to remember our veterans on Veterans Day. And speaking of Veterans Day, one of our sponsors here at the Ben Shapiro Show, of course, you've heard us talk about them before, is Legacy Box. And they are doing something amazing. They have been giving out for free their resources to veterans so that veterans can actually preserve their legacies, preserve their memories. We had the opportunity to sit down with a few veterans yesterday and talk about it. Joining me on the line is Tina Kiprios. She served in the Army for 10 years. Tina, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
So how did you decide that you wanted to be in the military? What inspired you to serve?
My dad had served in the Army, and I always thought that was very cool. He was in right after the Korean War, so he missed combat there. And then when I was getting to college, and I learned that ROTC would cover my college, that was a pretty big inspiration. And it was, the idea of following in my dad's footsteps and having my education covered definitely sealed the deal for me.
So what about serving in the military really changed your life?
My family wasn't typically very disciplined growing up at all. And so certainly that was a first wake up call for me, is actually being required to follow orders and meeting a particular standard, and that's not the house that I grew up in. So it was a pretty big transformation in terms of not only the necessity, but the value of meeting higher standards at the get-go.
Were there any specific experiences that stick out to you from your time serving?
There's certainly plenty. And I think probably one that sticks is really very early. When I, right after my officer basic course, I was assigned to a unit in Germany, and it's a U.S. Army Customs unit, and they're the folks that pack people out when they're going, and when they're going anywhere, whether they're going back to stateside or through combat missions or whatever. And when it's one of the things that made this unit unique, this company unique, a company of about 200 soldiers, was there were actually only 2 officers. And when I arrived in country at my unit, it turned out that my company commander, the other officer, was actually on emergency leave because his dad had just passed away. So as a brand new second lieutenant, literally right off the bus, I was made a company commander. So in this unit, the company commander was an 04 position, an officer of the 4th. It was a captain major position. I was a brand new second lieutenant. And so what it taught me pretty quickly is you don't know what you're going to be asked or expected to do. And so in this case, I was in charge, and my company commander was gone for just over a week. But in that week, I was responsible for everything in that unit.
So when you look back now, when you look forward to the future, what does your legacy mean to you? What's the legacy you hope to leave?
First is love of this country. I think one of the things that I learned, in Germany, and I got to go to England and Spain in my service as well, plus throughout the U.S. It's a special country, and we operate differently, I think, than every other country throughout history, and we take great care of not only taking care of our soldiers, but of fighting and winning wars in a way that we can be proud of ourselves for. And so on the global level, that's probably the first thing. And then, just on an individual level, the idea of discipline. I think my girls, would definitely affirm that I ran a much more disciplined house than I grew up in. And I think that learning to work together, learning to be an individual as well as working together as a team. I think those are probably the 3 top things for me that I take away.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing your story. Thank you so much for your service as well.
Thank you for the privilege. Have a great day.
Happy to welcome to the program Jake Huff, Sergeant Major. Thanks so much for taking the time, Sergeant.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is great. Appreciate it.
Let's talk about your background. Where are you from? How did you come to join the military?
So I was, my dad was in the military, so I was born in Germany, lived there for about 8 years. And then my dad was stationed in Wyoming, F.E. Warren Air Force Base, and we stayed there for the rest of growing up. I joined the military when I was 17 in the junior and high school. I knew I needed a way to get to college, and the National Guard was a way to do it. So I went to basic training between my junior and senior year of high school, and then the night I graduated high school, I left and went to Fort Rucker, Alabama to learn, what my job was going to be. I did 6 years in the National Guard to include a deployment to Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. And then I was a local sheriff's deputy, still hadn't finished all the education I wanted to get, so I came to the active Army just to finish my degree off, and I enjoyed it and stayed for the next 28 years, and I retired in 2025.
Can you describe what you think of as maybe some of your defining moments while you were in uniform that really changed your life, changed you?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that changed me and had an effect not just on me but on our family was assignment into special operations. I was assigned to 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, assessed and was selected for that unit. And that was an organization that just holistically took care of not only the soldier but the family. And it truly every day demonstrated what servant leadership is, which is what I thought I'd seen, through my dad's career. But this was the first time I'd seen it embraced wholly as a unit. And that changed the way I looked at leadership, the way it took care of our family. And, even now, though we've been out of the regiment for quite some time and retired, we still have great ties back to that organization and great friends there, and still have family members who serve in that organization.
So, when you tell your story to your kids, your family, what do you hope your legacy is? How do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be?
I think when a lot of people look at legacy, they look at kind of tangibles, what you leave behind, businesses and money and things like that. When I think of legacy, I think of how we impacted others. Particularly in my military career, how did we help those around us? The organization do its mission, but those around us, lift them up so that they could reach their goals. It's not something that's tangible. I can look at a picture and see soldiers I served with, and then the opportunities we got them, the help that we did with them, and where they're at in their careers today, and seeing that type of servitude leadership continue. And so for me, that's my legacy, and that's what I hope my family sees and my family does, is helping their community, helping those around.
Well, I really want to thank you for sharing your story, and of course for your service, and thanks to Legacy Box for helping us preserve those memories for you and your family as well. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for doing this. Greatly appreciated.
Joining us online is Robert Hickish. He served in the Navy for 20 years. Robert, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
So, Robert, why don't you start by explaining what got you into the Navy in the first place?
Well, probably it was back in 1982. I was just out of high school and looking for a job, and actually went to go look into the Air Force first, walked into the recruiter's office. This was in September of 82, and they said, why don't you come back in May? So I walked out of the Air Force recruiter, straight in the Navy recruiter, and actually went in that night.
And, when you served in the military, and obviously you were there for a very long time, what were some of your defining moments, things that changed you as a human being?
Gosh, just the training, just the discipline, the job discipline, camaraderie, the travel. Had the opportunity just to live in all parts of the United States, and as well as overseas in Japan. Just all around, just awesome experience to experience different cultures.
Were there any experiences that specifically stood out to you? Like when you think back on your service, anything that sort of jumps out at you?
I had an awesome time in Japan. The Japanese people were very welcoming, and just couldn't wait to get off work and just get on our mountain bikes and travel around town in Iwakuni, Japan.
What do you think that your legacy should be? What do you hope that your legacy is, for your kids, for your grandkids?
Just raising the kids in the military with the good work discipline, living in different parts of the United States, as well as Puerto Rico as the kids were growing up, getting them exposed to different parts of the country, different things going on. Just give them an opportunity just to, know themselves better.
And of course, I know that you have all those home videos, which are still on VHS tapes. So Legacy Box is going to help you get those transferred over so that we can make sure that those stories and that legacy can be preserved forever. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Absolutely, Ben. Thank you so much.
I'm joined on the line by Manuel Morgado. He served in the Navy during Vietnam. Manuel, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Welcome. Thanks for asking us.
So why don't we start by talking about how you got in the military in the first place?
Well, it was during the draft. This was 65. I was in college, and I was, more interested in fooling around than I was going to college. So at the time, they had the lottery, and my lottery number came in, and it was, I think, under 20. So I knew that I was going to be drafted, and my heritage is Portuguese, so I figured they're seamen, so I joined the Navy.
And what were some of the experiences, sort of the formative experiences that you think really changed your life and who you were?
Well, I'd never been on an airplane before, so right away when I went to basic training, and they make a man out of you. You have to do everything yourself. You don't have anyone to fall back on. And the experience, I think, changed my life. I grew up on a farm and became, I got to be a little more social because I got to meet a lot of people that were different than me. And it was a great experience. I think that was probably the biggest thing.
Well, when you look back now and you look at where your life has gone, what do you hope your legacy is moving forward?
Well, first of all, I would like to make sure that everybody knows that war is terrible. And the thing is that the thing I'm most proud about is that, my country asked me to go to war, and I responded. I didn't back out, and I'm a better person for it.
Well, obviously, we are so grateful for your service. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
Joining me on the line is Andrew Balafas. He's a West Point graduate. Andrew, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
This is a great thing you're doing here. Thank you very much for having me.
So let's talk about your military service and what you've been doing. How did you get involved in this in the first place?
In the military? Well, I had an opportunity presented. I was 17 years old when I entered West Point. Initially didn't want to go, but my mom kind of said, hey, this is an opportunity, and what you should really consider it. And I did. I went for it. And again, initially I went in as the opportunity for laying out the rest of my life, which it did. But, after a year at West Point, you're not in it for the opportunity. You're in it for the service.
And since then, you've joined the hospice industry. You work especially with families that have unique needs because veterans often have unique needs at the end of their lives. Well, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, veterans always have unique needs at end of life. I don't think that the public knows the kinds of things that the VA offers to veterans that Medicare does not, even veterans who are not Medicare age. So my last 14 years was primarily spent helping facilitate benefits for veterans and their families, but also I listen to a lot of veterans who have a lot of stories at end of life.
Andrew, you've done an amazing amount for veterans. What do you think makes this country so special?
Well, the Constitution, and we have to treat the Constitution as something sacred. The last 10 years, I was very active in the veteran community in the Chicago area. In my little town of St. Charles, where I was a member of 3 posts, we initiated Constitution Day. And it happened right at the time when a lot of the riots were going on, the Summer of Love, and we said we needed something else. So I was a big part of facilitating that, and it's been something that they've done every year since. And I think that Constitution Day should be just as significant as Independence Day.
Well, Andrew, what would you want your legacy to be, with your family, with your grandkids?
Well, legacy means leaving something for the future, sort of like planting a fruit tree and the people that come after you get to bear the fruit. And you see that in industry. I was in food manufacturing for almost 20 years. You want to put processes in place that live beyond you. And so in the Army, it'd be like mentoring somebody and them being a good leader forever. Me personally, I hope I'm remembered as a good father, a good husband. I'm a Catholic. I'd like to achieve salvation, and I would like to be known as someone who set the example for that.
Well, thank you so much for everything that you've done, and really thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure talking with you and meeting you.
Joining us on the line is George Aspel. He's a U.S. Navy Vietnam veteran. George, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ben.
So how did you end up in the military in the first place? What drew you to it?
I had a fight with my girlfriend, who's currently my wife, and had a few extra drinks that night, and the next morning jumped up and went and joined the Navy.
And what were your experiences in the military? How did that shape you as a human being?
It took me a long time to realize that the Navy did for me something that I never thought about. It taught me how to be a leader. It taught me how to treat people properly. and to apply myself in a way that allowed me to end up with a good career.
Are there any experiences that you specifically recall that really kind of stick out in your memory?
You know, I've thought I don't have a lot of just single experiences. What the Navy did for me was to tell me or show me that if I wanted to do anything with my life, I was going to have to get an education. So after my 4 years in the Navy, I got out in July and went back to school starting in September and graduated 3 years later and went on to have a reasonably good career.
So when you look back and you figure you define your legacy as a human being, well, what does your legacy mean to you?
A couple of things. One, that I served my country well. Number two, I think the best legacy I could ever have is that my grandchildren would say he was a good granddaddy.
Well, I really want to thank you so much for your service, and thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
We want to thank all of our veterans, and whether it's a loved one in uniform or your family's holiday mornings, preserve the stories that shaped you. Head over to legacybox.com/Shapiro today to preserve your family's history. That's legacybox.com/Shapiro. Alrighty, folks, coming up, we'll jump into that vaunted Ben Shapiro Show mailbag. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.